Friday night magic will never be the same. Today, zombie, assassin, he who paints the earth red.
Let's take Indian yellow and permanent red. And let's begin dropping some little highlights right up in here. Just let them sparkle.
Greetings, Planeswalkers. It's Chris, aka NAS, with Commander the Gathering. Today's another installment of FNM with NAS, where I go through my 60 some odd decks eventually. Today we explore deck 4 of 5 in the box, or Bolas's Citadel. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I hope all is going well with you and you're taking care of yourselves and the ones you love. For a little bit of context and some house cleaning, I have 60 plus Commander decks, and this series is about me exploring them. So far, we've knocked the following decks out of the park. We started with deck number 59, Morophon, deck number 3, Mizzix, deck number 62, Firesong and Sunspeaker, number 57, Edgar Markov, number 1, Unesh, number 40, Kamahl, Fist of Krosa, number 11, Admiral Becket Brass, number 7, the Scarab God, number 6, the Scorpion God, and number 8, the Locust God. So let's jump into deck number 9. The Amonkhet gods aside, now we move back to the plane or shard of Grixis, way back when Bolas was just ankle deep in his little scheme. This commander is also known as he who paints the earth red, Thraximundar. Thrax is a 6/6 zombie assassin who costs 7 mana, consisting of 4 generic, then a blue, black, and red. He has 3 abilities, the first of which is simple enough. Hate. Thrax, no, stop. Hate, no, not hate. Hate. Sate, no. Haste. Next, when Thrax attacks, defending player sacrifices a creature. And the last of the 3 abilities, whenever a player sacrifices a creature, I may put a 1/1 counter on Thraximundar. And spoiler alert, I'm going to put a 1/1 counter on Thraximundar. So this deck is themed in a few ways. First, it's set to present itself as the Harbinger of Bolas, his battlefield commander. And Bolas demands sacrifices. And of those he sacrifices, he makes more demands. So, flavor aside, this deck does 3 basic things. It sacks with Thrax, mainly to my benefit, but sometimes not. Thrax is just the king of carnage. Next, in honor of Bolas, we're going to amass a zombie army of Eternals. Last, I'm going to steal your stuff. And then I'm going to sack it just in case you didn't want to. Now that we have discussed Thrax and the guts of what this deck is going to be, let's get into things, starting with, as we do around here, lands. We have this trio of lands that allows me to access all colors of mana. This is key in the event that I steal your creature, and it has an ability that requires mana outside of my commander's color scheme, but I still may want to use it. The next 3 are colorless. There's Scavenger Grounds, which allows me to wipe away all graveyards. Nesting Grounds, giving me the ability to manipulate counters. And Majoring Network, giving me counters and mana ramp. And I always note at this point that if you want to see all of the lands or a complete deck list in general, there will be a link in the description box below. Lands aside, let us move to artifacts, starting with Mana Enhancers. A pair of 2-drops with Sky Diamond and Arcane Signet. Then a pair of Signets, Dimir and Rakdos by name. Seal of the Guild Pact can reduce spells of any 2 chosen colors, each by 1. Keep in mind that as I can pick any 2 colors, and Thrax will be both, he will be reduced by 2. And then a ring for each hand, Soul Ring and Replicating Ring, which can be bait for Nesting Ground that we saw earlier. In terms of equipment, there's not much here. 2 more staple type cards in Swiftfoot Boots and Prowler's Helm. Then the more special and flavorful of the 3, Unscythe, Killer of Kings. It gives the equipped creature 3/3 and first strike. If the equipped creature kills another creature, I may exile that creature and create a 2/2 zombie. And spoiler alert, I'm going to exile your creature and get my zombie token. Such a flavorful card, a bit expensive, but worth it here. On to what I refer to as static artifacts. Here's Contagion Clasp, which allows me to proliferate, and Ashnod's Altar, because when I steal your things, I'm not giving them back. Done with artifacts, we will move on to enchantments, starting with 2 auras. Curse of Verbosity, incentivizing attacking other players and drawing me cards in the process. And Charisma, more on this card a little bit later. Dictate of Erebos, because we want stacks of sacks with Thrax. And a bomb in this deck, Rooftop Storm. Thrax is a zombie, so with this, I can, in essence, cast him for free. Asterisk exclamation point. That asterisk exclamation point being that commander tax still applies here. So if he has died 0 times and Rooftop Storm is out, I can simply cast him. If he dies or goes back to the command zone for any reason, I can then recast him for 2 generic mana. And if he goes back to the command zone again, he will simply cost 4 generic mana, and that process will continue. Instance now, I am noticing I'm lacking a bit of targeted removal. I may have to adjust this. This deck obviously demands opponent's sacrifice, but that doesn't always remove a threat that needs to be removed. So if there is a bit too much sacrifice here, I may remove 1 or 2 and put in some targeted removal. Blah blah stuff aside, we have Crypt Incursion for graveyard control and possibly a little life gain, and Diabolic Edict to make you sacrifice at instant speed. Sorceries now, we have Innocent Blood. Again, Thrax does not care. Each player sacrifices a creature, including me. Sometimes you gotta break a few eggs to conquer a plane or 2, right? Mire in Misery only targets opponents to make them sack. This is interesting because it can force players to sacrifice indestructible non-creature gods. In the event it's their only thing on the board, or they're trying to avoid it being a creature, this forces their hand because it can still now hit that enchantment, forcing them to potentially sacrifice it. Next, Diabolic Tutor to help me fish for whatever answer I'm looking for. And a pair that does a little bit of graveyard interaction. Beacon of Unrest and Grave Upheaval. Both of them allow me to pull from any graveyard right to the battlefield, and each have a separate condition upon the spell resolving, which you can read. Creatures and Planeswalkers now. This is a bit different, as I'll start with kind of support cards and then move on to more targeted creatures, each synergizing in different ways. Pitiless Plunderer can hopefully net me a treasure, and so it's clear. If I steal your creature and sack it with Ashnod's Altar, that would net me a treasure token and 2 generic mana. Glen Elendra Liege to pump my board up, maybe twice. Thrax, she's looking at you, kid. Sidisi Undead Vizier could be more in the themed group because she's just amazing here. She can come in and exploit herself or potentially your creature that I just stole and allow me to tutor for any card. And she also has built-in Death Touch. And Rooftop Storm casts her for free as she is a zombie. Sidisi packs a punch in this deck. This card's new. I almost took it out twice, but I'm interested to see how it will end up working. Sedgemoor Witch. She has Menace for combat evasion, and each time I cast an instant or sorcery or copy of one, like when I steal your creatures perhaps, I get a pest token to potentially sacrifice and gain life while I'm sacrificing them. Pestilence Demon. More on him later. And Kess Dissident Mage. because I may want to just start casting instants and sorceries again from my graveyard. 2 Planeswalkers, each on theme and function. Angrath gives my creatures menace and helps me amass my eternal army. Liliana, Dreadhorde General of the Eternal Army, does a lot here. Each creature I sacrifice nets me a card without her doing anything else, just being on the board. And then you can read up because she does a lot more. And now creatures that support Sax and Thrax and this deck in a way that's a little more fine-tuned, and you'll get the gist here in one moment. As we gaze upon our first 2 that have Enter the Battlefield abilities, both of which actually hit me too, because as again, Thrax just wants everything to die. First is Plague Crafter, also targeting Planeswalkers, and has a condition in case you cannot sacrifice. And another zombie in regards to Rooftop Storm. Fleshbag Marauder, another sack machine, and when I play him, he can be the creature that I decide to sacrifice. But it's likely going to be one of yours that I stole. These 2 are open sack outlets, albeit the second one is a little bit more conditional, but it also does a lot more. Nantuka Husk and Brine Shaman. Nantuka Husk is a zombie, so I can potentially cast it for free. And he gets bigger as I sack more to him. Brine Shaman can tap and let me sack a creature, of course, and this allows me to buff mine. Or I can sack a creature and pay to counter your command. A creature spell, of course, and spoiler alert, it's going to be your commander. These next 2 are tappers. Hell's Caretaker lets me sack your creature that I just stole to return one of my own creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield. Priestess of the Forgotten Gods can tap and then allow me to sacrifice 2 creatures, likely one of yours and maybe one of my pests. And any number of target players, spoiler alert, it's all of you, but this does include me in the case that I want to have the option to sacrifice something that benefits me.
But wait! There's more!
Then I add 2 black mana and draw a card. On theme with sacrificing and a little end step here, this group will wrap up with Archfiend of Depravity, and this card is a nightmare to deal with in this deck. A 5/4 flying demon whose ability reads, at the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses 2 creatures they control, and then sacrifice all the rest. You may have noticed those cards all create a lot of sacrificing, sometimes my own creatures included. So, these cards make my sacrifices and your sacrifices even a little more sweet. Starting with Mayhem Devil. Anytime any player sacrifices a permanent, I deal a damage to any target. So that includes any fetch lands that you may decide to sacrifice. The potential here for damage is a lot, and as some of these creatures die, if Liliana is out, for example, that will all be netting me card draw on all of those death triggers. More sack synergy. We have Ruthless Deathfang, because why not have a Ruthless Dragon in this deck with some great abilities? Ruthless Deathfang is a 4/4 flying dragon that reads, when I sack a creature, a target opponent sacks a creature with me. And then last, with all of this sacrificing going on, be it at instant speed, at your end step, because Ruthless Deathfang made you, or because Dictate of Erebos made you sacrifice a little something also. Just to add the cherry on top, we have Turgrid, God of Fright, because Thrax wants all of those things. Turgrid reads, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, I may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under my control. And, spoiler alert, I'm going to do that. You may have noticed a lot of sacrifice built into this deck. There is a little bit of discard interaction, and you've seen one already, and you'll see more in a little bit. You know, and speaking of wanting all of those things, I have spells for that. Starting at sorcery speed, we have Act of Treason. It's kind of the standard of this theme. A sorcery speed 3 mana, I borrow a creature till the end of turn and it gets haste. Similar but slightly different is Hijack, which is a bit more fun because it allows me to potentially steal one of your artifacts. Malevolent Whispers is a bit more expensive, but it does buff a creature by +2/+0 until the end of turn. Limits of Solidarity, a little bit more expensive, but I can potentially cycle it away. And Slave of Bolas. This one sacrifices at the end. Built in. Enjoy. Now, I know what you're thinking. NAS, what if I want to steal their stuff, but at instant speed? Well, my friend, you're in luck. First, we have Grab the Reins. It's a bit more restrictive, but also flexible at the same time as it has 2 separate modes. Note that the first part does not untap the creature. That can be mildly important if I'm intending to attack with it or use it for a tap ability. However, if I'm just sacking it, it won't matter. And onto the sack mode of this card, this can allow me to sack that creature right away to do damage to any target or steal your creature but sacrifice one of my own. Again, modes and options. Because a zombie assassin has got to have his options, right? Options like Act of Aggression at instant speed, and I can do this for simply 3 generic mana if I'm willing to pay the life in place of the red mana. Last here, Word of Seizing with Split Second. And this one takes any permanent lands, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers. The theme of stealing aside, let's move on to Thrax initiating his plan to amass his army of zombie Eternals. The Amass ability reads as follows. Put a 1/1 counter on an army you control. If you do not control one, create a 0/0 black zombie army token first. So if you have Amass 1, it would create the army and put 1/1/1 counter. If it has Amass 3, it would create a 0/0 army and put 3 1/1 counters on it. So Thrax will start amassing the army of Bolas, starting with Lazotep Reaver. Keep in mind going forward, in case I kind of forget to mention, and I will, he and any zombies can be cast for free with Rooftop Storm. He's a 1/2 beast that amasses 1. Dreadhorde Invasion is an enchantment that amasses. At the cost of 1 life at my upkeep, it amasses 1 and also grants lifelink to any attacking army if its strength is high enough. Callous Dismissal bounces and amasses 1. Gleaming Overseer, a 1/4 zombie wizard that amasses 1 and gives zombie tokens Hexproof and Menace. Vizier of the Scorpion amasses 1 and gives zombie tokens Death Touch. Invade the City amasses X, with X being the amount of instants and sorceries in my graveyard. Widespread Brutality amasses 2 and has a unique wipe condition. The Dreadhorde Twins amass 2 and give zombie tokens Trample. Eternal Skylord is a 3/3 zombie wizard who amasses 2 and gives zombie tokens Flying. Enter the God Eternals amasses 4 and then does a lot. Enjoy the read. And then commence the end game. It cannot be countered, and it lets me draw 2 and then amass X, with X being the amount of cards in my hand. You thought we were done? The endgame has just started. Here's a glimpse of what's to come. Hail to the king, baby. First we have Nicol Bolas, Planeswalker. And then we have Nicol Bolas, Dragon God. Now onto the combos before we close things out. My favorite here is Pestilence Demon and Charisma. So it is clear, it means if I enchant Pestilence Demon with Charisma and pay 1 black mana to deal 1 damage to each creature, I then gain control of that creature. And as I added this card to the deck as I was getting it prepped for this video, I realized Mayhem Devil is another viable option for this. Not as great, but still able to put in work. Speaking of putting in work, Rooftop Storm interacts with the following cards. And I think I had a few more that I couldn't fit in without ruining the aesthetics of the shot. Nesting Grounds can be fun to interact with all of the Planeswalkers. I can drop this land after you think it's safe and bump him up, perhaps ultimate. It also works well with the +1/+1 counters placed on the amassed armies. Tegrid and the entire deck. Ruthless Deckfang, Dictate, Priestess of the Forgotten Gods. I'm hoping I can steal all of your things. And if I can't do it with Tergrid, I'm going to try and do it with Pestilence Demon and Charisma. So let's see what happens. Thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you had fun. This is Chris, aka NAS, with Commander the Gathering, and I'll see you when we planeswalk next Friday.